the team, the talk of the town, the flavour of the month, the Hawthorn Footy Club, what they were able to do on Friday night was exceptional. And we need to unpack it in some shape or form to understand it. They do the basics better than any team in the competition at the moment. And it's the reason why they're going to give themselves a chance against any team they play. The event, handling 97,500, so the biggest crowd that any of them would have played in front of, and the occasion is a process. It comes from the lead into that event. So they've been playing elimination finals. They've spoken about it consistently, but until you get there, you're not there. But just watching them in warm-up and throughout the early stages of the game, their ground level is as clean as any team in the competition. Their ability to stick tackles when the tackles were there to be stuck was good. They actually tackled at 73%. It's their fifth best result for the year. But it seemed to me like there was not a missed tackle. Mm-hmm. They stuck every tackle that they went for, and they were actually really hard to tackle because they were so clean at ground level. They went from inside the contest to outside the contest with time and space, much better than their opposition, and they've been doing that consistently over 3 months. When Bulldogs got the ball, they weren't as clean. Hawthorn's pressure was elite and Bulldogs weren't able to get from the inside to the outside. So in a very simple, very small part of the game that's repeated over and over and over, whether it's in the front half, whether it's in the back half, whether it's a low out number or it's a congested part of the ground, if you can be clean at ground level and work the ball to teammates out into space, out of congestion, well, then you're going to be good offensively. And if you can prevent your opposition from doing that, well, then you're going to be good defensively. And that's what the Hawks are doing extremely well.
So we had Daniel Horn from Champion Data in on Tuesday, and he said that the magic number that Hawthorn want to keep their entries under is 50. So, because largely they're really good at restricting entries, but when the ball does go inside forward 50 for them, they're actually quite easy to score against. They've kept the Western Bulldogs to 39 entries.
Yes.
Their average was 56 or nearly 57 for the year.
Yeah, it was an and that was like, you got to remember that's a product of what I just spoke about. So Jai Newcomb was the cleanest player in the field, and often when he won the ball, he was facing away from his goal. And now I think that's a little bit by design. He sweeps the contest a little bit. He comes from the offensive side of the contest. His man is probably playing goal side of him, so it gives him full access to the contest, unless his man wants to play in front, and then he's goal side and he could go the other way.
Like that stoppage goal he kicked.
Oh, look, it was brilliant. And I think that it's a really simple aspect of the game. It's not particularly sexy. It's rinse repeat. You're going to get it. You get it every 30 seconds. You get a ground ball and a contest, and across the ground. It looks to me like the Hawthorn players have been drilled on the basics. They do it over and over and over. Clean ball handling and use, and then tackling, and the ability to stand
and method
up and
when
tackle.
they win it back.
The method helps.
Like you're saying, don't get distracted by everything that's going on, the show that they're putting on, the celebrations, the characters, the young players. It is the simple stuff that they are doing well. And after that round 5. Loss when they were 0-5, Dylan Moore spoke exactly about that. We got to train harder. We got to work harder. We got to do and question what we are doing and how much. Essentially, how much do we want it? So I reckon, for me, just from the outset, it feels like from that moment at round 5 when Dylan Moore spoke like that, and it'll be one of the great grabs of the year. Go back and I reckon they just have done exactly what you're saying, just drilled the little things and done it more often than any other team.
Well, in the end. You can't. It doesn't just happen. So it's have to be schooled. So you need to train it, and you can't just train it at half rat power either. You've got to train it with intensity. There's got to be, you've got to be put in the right positions by the coaches. The drill needs to replicate the game in some shape or form, and then the players need to bring their intensity to be able to lock in those gains, to be able to realise the work that you've done and be able to implement it when you get into game day. So. The coaching staff and the players have come together, and we shouldn't be surprised about what the Hawks are doing. And they will, if they maintain that, if they do that next week, the week after that, they'll be very hard to beat. You're going to need a side who can out-grunt them in that little circle, in those smaller elements of the game if the Hawks are going to get knocked over.
Yeah, Sydney Hawthorn prelim final would be something to watch, no doubt about that. All right, let's move on because you want to speak about those Swans.
Yeah, so let's get to Sydney, and what a fantastic match! It definitely was the match of the weekend. It was the Giants were gallant and had the game on their terms for the large part, but turning home and away form into finals form is not guaranteed. It's not an automatic a fait accompli that's going to happen. But Sydney were able to do it. And in particular, Isaac Heaney, Papley was excellent coming back in the side. Warner, Goulden, their big four by the end, they'd floated to the top of the ratings and were able to have great influence. And their coach was pretty happy. He would have had a torrid afternoon, I would have thought. But by the end of the game, he was pretty happy. For the large part of that game, Giants had foot on throat and they weren't going to let it go. And Adam Kingsley said afterwards, he goes, well, you got to play 4 quarters. We didn't play the last quarter. That was as simple as he put it.
They missed some easy shots at goal as well. As simple as that sounds, they go through. They're probably up by 6 or 7 goals, and it's buried.
Oh, look, and there's no tomorrows on this. You need to make the most of your opportunities. But Sydney did that. I mean, 27 points down late in the second quarter. Papley takes the ball on the wing and sees Isaac Heaney getting goal side of his man, and Heaney's moved forward into that particular point of time. Takes the one-hander. Snap goes in, and all of a sudden, okay, well you're close enough. They kick the first 2 in the third quarter, but then the Giants go bang 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 again, and it's back out at 25, 26 points. So the fact that the Swans were able to run over the top. I mean, we saw it against Collingwood late in the season with that last quarter performance, and Warner has been instructive on those last quarter
7
surges.
Clearances last quarter.
Yeah, it was huge.
7.
Yeah, and through the midfield and behind centre, actually, he was able to get really good field position. I thought Papley was huge. Yeah. Kicked 2 goals himself, had 4 direct goal assists, including the last 2 to Heaney's goal from 70 odd and the Amadi goal. But yeah, look, they did a lot right. Their defenders stood up, didn't have to, Blakey didn't have to play a huge game, was pretty well held. But Lloyd was the one that stood up, 32 touches, had nearly 900 metres gained, and was able to give the Swans some bounce off the halfback, especially late and James Jordan clamped down on Whitfield at the other end. So there was a little bit of a juxtaposition there. They'd be bleeding, the Giants, absolutely bleeding. But
they can still win it. The Giants can still win it.
Well, we talk about the type of, the makeup of a team and what winning football looks like at the moment. As I said, the Giants and the Hawks are the prototypes. Geelong have remodelled themselves into that. Sydney are doing it a slightly different way, but it'd be fascinating when you get to the pointy end, the prelims, to see how they play out.
Luke Barker from the Swans to join us a little bit later on as we move on to Thursday night. And what about those Cats?
Yeah, I want to talk about how they've, replumbed. You need to give Chris Scott his flowers, and he's been getting them consistently. But he's look, they look an entirely different team. I mean, you think about 22, the grand final, right through 22, they were talking about how dangerous they are offensively. But that was with Hawkins in front of the ball. And now without Tomahawk, it's going to be really challenging in terms of a selection dilemma because
he's not playing.
The way that
Hawkins not playing.
The way they play
How could you change that lineup?
The way they're playing does not feed into his
He's not playing.
Strengths.
He's not even a discussion point.
Well,
Tomahawk, you're not changing that mix.
You talk to Geelong people,
really?
Like people that have been there, and they see Chris Scott as a really loyal coach. He wasn't that worried when they were 7-0. He maintained his composure and spoke about the long, lifting their eyes in the long game. He wasn't that worried when they lost 6 in a row. He said, well, this is the ebbs and flows, and we'll work it out. And he's not that worried, winning a qualifying final and then then getting themselves into a prelim. But I thought, if you saw the vision pre-game, Port looked really serious, and they were getting around the circle, looking at each other in the eye. That was quite stern. I don't know who started it, but it looks like the Geelong boys, they were clapping. They were clapping and dancing. It was like it's nearly like the Irish boys when they're clapping together. But you actually, there's a deeper purpose to that. It's about being in sync and being on song and, sharing, contributing to something that's elevated and raised by doing it together. And that's exactly how they played. Their football was irrepressible early in that game. And Port Adelaide did a good job to stay with them in that first 40 minutes in some shape or form because they were able to finish but the ball just absolutely buzzed up and down the ground. The small forward, so Manor goes and has 23, kicks 3. Myers does what he does up and down the ground, kicks 3. Stengel kicks 4. Brad Close, the only guy that didn't kick straight, missed a couple of set shots that could have given him a couple. But those small forwards, those 4, then you put Cameron and Neale, and they're running around with, running back to goal and absolutely sieving the defence. So that high forward mix and the mobile talls, so dynamic, so challenging, so clean. The midfield did what it needed to do. It was an exceptional performance, and they're set up as well as any going into the prelims.
They are. And Tom Stewart comes back, of course. Not sure we're buying the illness, but he'll be right from that hamstring injury, I would have thought. So to do all that without him and to completely obliterate Port Adelaide's midfield, which we'd spoken a lot about throughout the years and leading into this game versus Geelong's, who had been the biggest issue for them, was just extraordinary.
Brisbane themselves, their structure was sound. The Carlton fed into Brisbane's game. They were able to get their intercept game going. Jack Payne, who's been injured, it would be interesting to see how that pans out because he was pretty good early with Harris Andrews in that intercept game. Leicester just finds himself in a dangerous spots to defend really well, which allows a guy like Dane Zorko to do what he did. 19 touches in the first half. He was able to bounce the ball back. It was basically lambs to the slaughter in many ways, which rendered the visitors to the Gabba, the Carlton crowd, relatively ineffective from an early stage. The thing that's interesting to me about Brisbane, they'll go and play the Giants. It's going to be a really hard run for them, and it starts straight away up there at NG Stadium. But they've got experience all over the park, but their match winners are their match winners are young guys. Yeah, so. You look at that half forward line. There's a lot expected of Lohman, who is only a second year player. Logan Morris, who's an excellent player, but he just played in his first final and looked okay. But you're expecting a lot from these players. Rayner and Bailey have been on the fringes. They've been dangerous players, and Rayner's definitely taken a step up this year, but they miss too many goals when they get their chances. Fletcher's been great on the wing, and Ashcroft played his first final, and it's great to see him run around at the right time of the year. 9 score involvements. But there's if I include Rayner and Bailey as a younger type, Wilmot you could probably put into that mix. They're the younger sort of middle-aged sort of players in their list. So you think vulnerable? Well, I think that's what's explained. They're very good and they're very gettable in the last 6 to 8 weeks, potentially last 6 weeks. Brisbane's best football is intoxicating. It's awesome. And Joey, you still got Joey Danaher and Cameron, like Hipwood's up and down. There's Dunkley's excellent. Jared Berry, I reckon, when he's playing his best, is great. Neale, McCluggage, you've got guns everywhere. But where's the glue? The glue is that you need all 23 rowing or 22 rowing the boat at the same time and being really connected in the way they go about it. But I think that there's just too many ebbs and flows in their game. They need to pull that together. First half, yes, was excellent. Second half was questionable. And all Carlton needed to do was improve their contest and their intensity. So if that's all you need to do against the Brisbane side, and there would have been a bit of conservation in Brisbane's attitude. Can Brisbane cope with that pressure that we just heard John Longmire speak about, that the Giants brought for 3 quarters? You'd have to question whether they can. If the Giants can replicate that at home and replicate the contest work that they had against Sydney for 3 quarters, and you'd think it's going to be really difficult for the Lions. The very best of Brisbane can do that. The very best of Brisbane is capable, because Lachie Neale's as clean around the ball as anyone. As I said, McCluggage, Dunkley, you've got Ashcroft. McInerney, the ruckman's important. McInerney's huge. I just love those big, aggressive, combative ruckmen. Like if you're going to be a ruckman, you want to be able to run around, take grabs around the ground. Giants have got some youngsters as well, though. Absolutely, Pete Ling and Jones and Cadman, and they have a few in the same boat as Brisbane. Oh, absolutely. They're Callahan. These Brisbane types. Brisbane probably. I feel like Brisbane want to play to play territory football. They're not like they build from the back, uncontested mark style. When they get the game on their terms in the front half, they're pretty good. But then the flip side of that is that when you get your game on your terms in the front half, you've got mass congestion there as well. So a side like GWS or a good defensive side should be able to hold up for periods of time when there's congestion in your D50. But it's going to be a fascinating game. Brisbane's best is definitely good enough, but can they bring it? It's probably, obviously, the Giants will go in favourite, but still a few queries on Brisbane to answer if they're to continue in this season.
All right, Saturday night, the Giants taking on Brisbane NG Stadium. A word on the Blues.
Yeah, look, there's so much to unpack with this. I think they were trying to Vossi and his coaching staff trying to pull a rabbit out of the hat. This wasn't about a poor elimination final or the first half or the selection or the tactics. It wasn't about any of that. It was the fact that they just dropped off the face. They just dropped off a cliff in the last 2 months. How
much of an excuse do you give them with personnel?
No, I don't.
No. So it's a fail. They've underperformed.
I would match that. I think they absolutely have. I would match their personnel troubles, which got to an extent for a couple of weeks there that were pretty difficult to handle. But I would match that with what we saw through the back end of 23 when at different stages they missed a lot of players in a lot of different over a longer period throughout 23, but were able to build, find their mojo, get back into contention, go into finals and performed more than admirably through that final series last year. They weren't able to find that same synergy and connection. They weren't playing for each other. There wasn't as much there weren't as many role players that were contributing and allowing the talent to come to the surface, and that's what you need in a finals team. That's what you need to be able to beat the best teams in the comp. The tactic of playing Elijah Hollins as your six forward behind the stoppages in the back half, it didn't help that you're losing centre bounce and you lost territory on your back foot straight away. But the tactic of putting a forward in behind the contest, it basically fueled. Dane Zorko was.
I know.
In the end, Brisbane were plus 2 or 3 in the middle of the ground when the ball was in their forward 50. There was no way Carlton were going to be able to move the ball. So whatever the tactics worked there, they were ineffective. They fed into an opposition's strengths rather than taking away their weakness. It was designed to protect and minimise damage more than give themselves a chance to win, which only the coaches would know whether this was about minimisation.
Surely not.
Well, there's no other way.
Protecting percentage in the final.
No, but maybe it was just staying in the game for long enough to give themselves a chance, because I would have thought the only way Carlton were going to win that game was to hold 6 forwards forward, force Brisbane.
Which they did. Hollins went forward after
quarter time, and it didn't. Like first 15, the second didn't look much different until Tom DeConey came in, and obviously everything. It was a perfect storm. You start TDK as the sub. You get smashed out of centre bounce, which has been a strength of yours, which means you're on the back foot as far as territory goes. You want to take uncontested mark away, but your tactics lend to the opposition to be able to kick the ball around. So one thing I am glad at that Sam Doherty got through.
Yeah,
there's a responsibility of a coach and a coaching group to protect their players from themselves at times. And the way Vossi explained it after, I thought was excellent. To sit in front of Sam Doherty, and he's ticked every box. He jumped every hurdle.
Yeah, physically, but not from a performance point of view.
No, absolutely not. So you can't do that. But when you've had a player who's been in that situation 2 or 3 or 4 times before, and he has come through on the preparation or performance aspect of finishing the job, then you're going to support him. But I thought it was an interesting choice. It definitely didn't help Carlton. There was probably more chance it was going to hurt them than help them, and hurt the player, but I'm glad that he got through.
All right, that was the buck stops here for Super Groups. It's another elimination final exit. They haven't won a final in 3 years. I've been critical for a long time, and I remain so. I just feel like, and I said yesterday, that the Bulldogs list management group would feel let down after essentially assembling what I believe to be, if not the best list in football, the second best. And all they are saying is sort of, here, We'll fill a car up with petrol. We'll give you a nice sports car. It's got all the premium petrol in it. You've just got to get in, Luke. You just got to drive it in a straight line. And for whatever reason, he's been unable to do that. So people say, is their list really that good? Well, speak to Champion Data. They got 5 top 50 players: Bontempelli, Dale, Richards, Norton, Treloar. That's not including Ugle Hagen. It's not including Darcy. It's not including Jones. It's not including Libba. Like that, they are absolutely stacked. And I just think if Sam Mitchell was coaching the Western Bulldogs, if Chris Scott was coaching the Western Bulldogs, if Justin Longmuir was coaching the Western, anyone was coaching the Western Bulldogs, they'd be in a far superior position over the last 3 years than what they have been. And I just feel like it has been a wasted era, and that they should, as they should have a number of times, taken a deep dive into why Luke Beveridge does really strange things. And that was evident once again on Friday night, Bucks. But I know you've been a big defender of him. How do you reconcile that performance and the season that was for the Western Bulldogs this year?
No, I don't think I'm defending at any point. I think I'm just calling out what you see, and there are going to be ebbs and flows in the course of a season. There are going to be
3 seasons, though. This is across 3 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, as you go, the longer you go on, the more that the evidence can be there. They played in a grand final in 21, and we're in great shape halfway through the third quarter before Melbourne went on a run. Winning a flag in 2016 gives you that validation, I suppose, as a coach at the level after being involved in premierships throughout his journey as a coach.
It doesn't absolve you from criticism 8 years down the line.
No, but you look at the big picture. You can look at what we've just seen. I thought that the non-selection of Riley West was interesting enough. I thought that he was really a really important part of their forward mix. Not so much. Riley West in and of himself is quite a limited player, but he's a gutsy player. He's a heart and soul player. If you'd employed him on James Sicily, for instance, I reckon that you would have nullified one of the opposition's big threats, and you might have been able to get a little bit more contest in front of the ball. It just seems to be that type. But this is what happens when you don't get the.
This is what he does, though. This is what he does. This is what he did in the first 8 weeks of the season, which gets you 3 and 5, which means you miss top 4 again, which means you've never been top 4. It means there's no room for error in the back half of the year. It means there's no room for error on Friday night. This is what happens. Riley West is the classic example. Bontempelli playing centre half forward when the game's on the line, or on the bench, which he wasn't aware of after the game. He didn't even know the game time of Bontempelli. This is what he does. And it's not personal. I'm just thinking, if I was a Bulldogs fan, if I was their list management group, if I was Amit Baines, who says they've got a top 4 list, I'd be going, we are let down by these stupid tactics and selection moves that happen repeatedly.
But even if you take away the isolated tactic, there's an underlying theme from the Dogs this year that became consistent. So if you go back to round 1, Melbourne beat them by 45 points, and they had 40 more uncontested marks. They had 129 uncontested marks, and they evened up the contest. In round 13, they were flogged by Brisbane at Marvel by 43 points, 30 plus 34 uncontested marks, the Lions. Round 17 against Port, they were flogged 48 points on Adelaide Oval, and they were plus 45 uncontested marks, Port Adelaide. So it's and then in the Crows in round 22, were able to beat them by 6 goals, pretty much 6 or 7 goals, and dominated. Were able to move the ball with short kicks and marks, shift the Bulldogs' defence, and put them under real pressure. The Bulldogs couldn't get the ball back off these teams. So the Crows, Port, Brisbane and Melbourne this year, it's exactly what Hawthorn did. So you go in, you're like, okay, well, there's a really significant, because the Bulldogs have had, the 4 of those 4 really poor performances in amongst their season, which started poorly, but then showed that it was heading in the right direction. But having said that, 2 of their last 6 games leading into finals, if you can shift the ball and move the ball against them and match them in contested ball, they get dominated. And that was evident. And Sam Mitchell, who we know, and the Hawthorn coaching staff, who we know have done extremely well coaching their own players and getting the best out of their own players, they've also proven to be fairly astute at looking at the opposition and creating a game style and a game plan that's going to really challenge them. So
That's
what we saw. So we shouldn't really have been surprised. I tipped the Dogs.
Everyone was tipping into the Bulldogs. A lot of people were suggesting they're going to win the whole thing, not just Friday night, the whole thing.
Yeah, could they go the whole way? I thought their performance against the Giants 2 weeks earlier was really strong, and I rate the Giants. And their form had been great, but when you look at it, you think, wow, they've got too many. They've had too many performances where they just haven't shown up.
Every 4 or 5 weeks, they had one of those performances.
That needs to be answered.
Sam Mitchell 3-0 in his last 3 games against Luke Beveridge. Are Sydney locked into the 3 tall forwards? Do McDonald, McLean, and Marty keep their place for the prelim final? I personally think Marty's vulnerable.
I think they are locked in, and I think they have been for a long time. Like this is a coaching philosophy, and I think it's about big men, providing the structure for the players around them. They haven't got a lot of small forwards that are there to come in. Would you bring Adams in, who's another midfielder a midfielder who you're trying to play as a forward?
Couldn't you drop Marty?
Wicks is the potential.
Play Campbell just as an extra runner and play McInerney as a sub.
Well, they're all in anyway, so you need to bring someone else in.
And then bring,
like a Wicks or an Adams or someone like that, potentially. But and Sydney won't be shy on players that they could potentially bring in. Robbie Fox is one who can play multiple roles, but
he's got a good record in finals.
I think that Longmire and the Sydney coaching staff are sold on these big
Seems
fellas.
that way, but Marty was I just thought at times uncompetitive.
Well, it's nearly the antithesis of what we're seeing in winning footy at the moment. Like Hayward plays such an important role for their team, and if you can quell him, well, it takes a lot. Like Hayward and Papley are the two outside of Heaney who sort of drops in there to go forward, and Parker, who was hitting the scoreboard before the weekend. But they're definitely a side that are going about it slightly differently. On that, talking about tall forwards, we spoke earlier a little bit about Shannon Neale and the potential of Tom Hawkins. What did you think of Neale's performance? Is he any chance of
0? He plays his role perfectly.
It's his to lose now, is it not? It's amazing the game.
I just don't think it's a question. I just think they're not going to change that lineup for a prelim final, and then it'd be unlikely for them to do it for a grand final if they get through successfully. So I just think the forward line mix is really strong. It was their one huge advantage going in on Thursday night, and all of them played their role perfectly, including him. He's been in good form.
It's just amazing, the swings and roundabouts. So Tom Hawkins came into the side in 2011, which pushed Cam Mooney out at the time, which was Tom Hawkins coming of age and his first crack at it. Shannon Neale is now in the position for Tom Hawkins. Time waits for no man, and sometimes you cop an injury or you pack up at the wrong stage of a season, and it seems that will be the case because Geelong's VFL got beaten, so there's no more practice matches as such to put your hand up. But, it will be fascinating viewing over the next couple of weeks.
Stephen Coniglio looks injured to me. Playing injured players in finals often backfires.
But we hear the ones that are
that's been well documented though. And he's clearly been hampered for a long time. Yeah,
his shoulder again.
He's just not. He's just wearing the long sleeve. He's just not the player that he is when he's fully fit. So I don't know.
And form is about preparation and confidence and belief.
So you playing this week?
And being ready. You play him. Yeah, you keep him going. I mean, obviously the coaching staff will be aware of what's going on internally, whether he is carrying it, whether it's a confidence thing or whether it's actually an issue of pain management.